Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something really critical. It's the Global Cybersecurity Outlook 2025 report. This is a pretty fascinating piece from the World Economic Forum working with Accenture. And our plan, really, is to unpack this big report for you, pull out the key insights, maybe some surprising bits, basically give you a shortcut to getting your head around this complex world of cybersecurity. We want to look at the biggest challenges, what it all means for organizations, and, what it means for you.
Yeah, and it's worth noting where this all comes from. It's not just one viewpoint. The report pulls together a lot. There's a big global cybersecurity outlook survey, interviews with top execs, C-suite folks, plus insights from workshops and data from the WEF's own cybersecurity meetings. So it's synthesizing quite a range of perspectives. Okay, great context. So the report really paints this picture of cyberspace just getting way more complex. What's actually driving that? Why is it so much harder now?
Well, the report points to 5 main factors that are sort of compounding each other. First, you've got rising geopolitical tensions. That creates a much more, let's say, volatile cyber landscape. Think state-sponsored attacks and things like that.
Right, real-world conflicts spilling online.
Exactly. Second, everything's so interconnected now. These incredibly complex global supply chains we rely on, they create risks that are really hard to see, let alone manage. Vulnerabilities can stretch way beyond your own company.
So, even if your own security is tight, a partner somewhere down the line could be the weak link.
Precisely. Third is the speed of new tech adoption, things like AI. They bring amazing benefits, sure, but they also open up brand new vulnerabilities, sometimes faster than we can secure them.
Look.
Fourth, regulations. They're popping up everywhere globally. Necessary, maybe, but it adds this huge compliance burden. And then finally, tying it all together is this widening cybersecurity skills gap. Just not enough people to manage all these risks effectively.
That makes a lot of sense when you lay it out like that. It feels like a perfect storm brewing. Now, one thing that really jumped out at me was this concept of cyber inequity. It sounds like more than just theory. The report shows a real divide between the cybersecurity haves and have-nots.
Oh, absolutely. The data is quite stark, actually. You see it clearly between small and large organizations. Get this, 35% of small organizations feel their cyber resilience just isn't adequate. And what's really worrying is that figure has jumped 7-fold since just 2022.
Wow.
Yeah. Meanwhile, large organizations have actually nearly halved that number. They're improving. It's led to this alarming point where 71% of the cyber leaders surveyed think small organizations have basically hit a tipping point. They can no longer properly secure themselves in this environment.
So, okay, if a small supplier or maybe a local government office can't keep up, what's the knock-on effect? Is that like a systemic risk?
Yeah, it's exactly that. It creates these systemic weaknesses. Think about it. A compromised small player in a critical supply chain, that could potentially bring down much larger, supposedly more resilient companies or services. It affects everyone. And it's not just size. There are big regional gaps, too. Look at confidence in responding to a major attack on critical infrastructure. In Europe and North America, only about 15% lack confidence, but that jumps to 36% in Africa and 42% in Latin America. Huge differences.
That is a massive gap. And what about public versus private sector? Similar story.
Very similar. 38% of public sector orgs report insufficient resilience. Compare that to just 10% for medium to large private companies. And a lot of that seems tied to talent. 49% of public sector groups say they lack the needed talent. That's up by a third just since 2024.
Third in 1 year. That's huge.
It is. And sector-wise, finance tends to be ahead, mostly because of heavy regulation. But areas like education, government, healthcare, and SMEs, they're really feeling the brunt of this cyber inequity. It's definitely not a level playing field.
Okay, so we've got this picture of growing complexity, widening inequity. It really sets the stage. Let's shift focus now to the threats themselves. This is where it gets really interesting, I think. What's changing in the cybercrime world? What are we actually up against now, according to the report?
Well, the landscape is always shifting, right? But some old threats stick around while new tech gives others a massive boost. Ransomware, for example, is still the #1 risk for organizations. About 45% cite it. Cyber-enabled fraud, think phishing, business email compromise, that's right up there too. And for individuals like you and me, identity theft has actually become the main personal cyber risk.
So the usual suspects are still active.
Yeah.
But something's making them worse, more effective.
Exactly. And that something is largely AI, particularly generative AI. It's acting as a massive catalyst for cybercrime. It's helping criminals create attacks that are way more sophisticated, and they can do it at scale. Almost half, 47% of organizations, say these adversarial uses of Gen AI are their top worry.
How exactly does GenAI help them? Is it writing better phishing emails or...
That's part of it, yeah. But it's more than that. Think of Gen AI lowering the barrier to entry. It allows less skilled actors to craft really convincing scams, deepfake audio or video, personalized social engineering attacks. You don't need deep technical skills anymore to pull off something pretty damaging. The costs and expertise needed have just dropped significantly.
That Erupt case study mentioned in the report really illustrates that, doesn't it? Where they used manipulated video and voice calls to trick an employee into sending millions. And the scary part was they didn't even breach the IT systems directly. Just pure tech-enhanced social engineering.
Precisely. An old-fashioned scam with a modern makeover, as the report put it. It's quite chilling. And what's also deeply concerning is this convergence we're seeing between cybercrime and, well, traditional organized crime groups, not the violent ones.
Really, like mafia groups getting into hacking?
Sort of, yeah. They're entering the market, bringing their methods, changing the nature of cybercrime, and really increasing the social impact. We're seeing things like these massive online scam farms, particularly in Southeast Asia. They've reportedly trafficked over 220,000 people to work in them. They function like criminal service providers. And these operations are estimated to have siphoned over $1 trillion globally last year alone.
$1 trillion. That's staggering. And it feels like a shift from just stealing data to impacting society more directly.
That's the key point. The threat now extends beyond data breaches to potentially impacting human safety and core societal functions.
Where are we seeing the biggest risks there?
Critical infrastructure is definitely high on the list. Think about water facilities. Their operational technology, the OT systems that control physical processes can be vulnerable. An attack could lead to contamination or service loss. We saw an example with a U.S. water utility attack just last October. Fire security is another huge concern. The WHO has warned about AI, cyber attacks, genetic engineering, potential for catastrophic risk there, disrupting labs, stealing sensitive genetic data. A couple of labs were targeted in 2024. And remember, that breach at a genetic testing company affected nearly 7 million people. And then there's critical communications, telecoms, satellites, those undersea cables everyone relies on, they're targets, especially with geopolitical tensions high. Think of the Viasat attack in 2022, or incidents with cables in the Baltic Sea. And finally, energy. Power grids are obvious targets. Plus, as we build out new renewable energy systems, we have to build security in from the start, or we risk creating new vulnerabilities.
Okay, so the threats are evolving fast, they're hitting critical areas, and this complexity and inequity makes everything harder. Given all that, how are organizations actually trying to cope? What strategies are working or not working?
Well, it's complicated. There's this interesting thing the report calls the AI cyber paradox. On one hand, most organizations, about 66%, expect AI to significantly impact cybersecurity, likely for the better in defense. But, and this is the paradox, only 37% actually have processes to check if the AI tools they're using are secure before they roll them out.
Wait, so they know AI is powerful, but they're not checking their own AI tools for security hold?
Pretty much. And it's even worse for smaller organizations. About 69% of them lack those kinds of safeguards.
Why the gap? Is it just moving too fast? Or a skills thing again?
It seems to be a mix. Lack of clear governance, maybe the speed of adoption just outpaces the security teams. And yeah, probably a skills gap in knowing how to assess these new AI tools properly. But the flip side is crucial. AI does offer huge potential for defense. It can help humans by crunching massive data sets to spot threats early, automating routine tasks like patching. People are even talking about AI as a kind of virtual CISO, or using it to power smart honeypots to trap attackers, like the SFINT project mentioned. So it really cuts both ways.
A double-edged sword, definitely.
Absolutely. Then there's the looming quantum threat. The worry is that quantum computers will eventually be able to break today's standard encryption. Public key encryption.
The harvest now, decrypt later idea.
Yeah.
Where they steal encrypted data, now planning to break it later.
Exactly. It's a long-term threat, but organizations are starting to pay attention. Around 40% are proactively looking into it. And NIST, the standards body, has already released post-quantum cryptography standards, PQC, to help prepare for that transition.
Okay.
And we have to come back to supply chains. We touched on it earlier, but it's huge. It's the top ecosystem cyber risk. Over half, 54%, of large organizations say it's their biggest barrier to being resilient. The main worries are vulnerabilities in software from third parties or attacks that exploit those supply chain links.
Like that CrowdStrike update issue in 2024 that caused that massive global IT outage.
Precisely. That highlights the risk perfectly. It also underlines why things like a software bill of materials and SBOM are becoming so important.
Like an ingredients list for software, so you know what's inside.
Basically, yes, it gives you visibility. Now, on the regulatory front, it's another mixed bag. Most leaders, 78% in the private sector, agree that regulations are vital for improving security overall. However, almost 70% also find the regulations too complex or too numerous, or they struggle making sure their third parties comply. This can lead to what the report calls regulatory fatigue, just getting overwhelmed.
So we need rules, but the current web of rules is becoming counterproductive for some.
That seems to be the tension, yeah. It points to a real need for better coordination, public-private cooperation, maybe more global harmonization to simplify things.
Makes sense? And underlying all this, the skills gap again.
Still a major issue. It actually got worse, widened by 8% between 2024 and 2025. 2 out of 3 organizations report moderate to critical gaps. Only 14% feel confident they have the talent they need.
Wow, only 14%.
Yeah. And again, the public sector is hit hardest. That 33% jump in their reported talent gap is significant. So organizations really need to invest in training, especially around AI skills, but also think broader. Look beyond traditional cyber degrees, maybe. Recruit from communications, law, finance. Bring in different thinking. And we can't ignore burnout. It's affecting more than half of CISOs, the Chief Information Security Officers. That's a serious problem.
Over half. That's unsustainable. How do you keep your top security people effective if they're burning out? Does the report offer any ideas there?
It points towards needing better support systems for them, clearer expectations, and really elevating the CISO role, seeing it as strategic leadership, not just constant firefighting, which ties into resilience more broadly. The report really hammers home that 100% security just isn't realistic. You will get breached eventually. So you need adaptable strategies. A strong security culture is key. That means things like training, yes, but also making it safe for employees to report mistakes. Anonymous channels, non-punitive policies. The Indian cooperative banking system example showed how effective that can be.
So encouraging people to speak up without fear.
Exactly. Cyber insurance is another tool that's growing, but again, we see the inequity. Larger organizations feel much more confident leveraging it, 71%, than small ones, 35%. So it can actually widen the gap. And finally, a really crucial point is integrating IT security with OT security operational technology, managing the risk across both the digital and the physical control systems holistically. Schneider Electric is highlighted as doing this well.
Right. Bridging that gap between office networks and factory floor systems, for example.
Precisely. And all of this fundamentally comes down to the economics of cybersecurity. It can't be seen just as a cost center. It has to be a strategic investment. Because cybercrime, it's incredibly profitable for the attackers. We're talking over $12.5 billion in losses just in the U.S. in 2023 alone.
So the return on investment for criminals is huge.
It is. The challenge for defenders is quantifying their own risk and the value of their investments. It's hard to put a dollar figure on preventing an attack that didn't happen. The report makes an interesting parallel to climate change. Just like governments might subsidize renewable energy, maybe they need to offer incentives to help smaller businesses, SMEs, afford essential cybersecurity measures.
Like cybersecurity subsidies. Interesting idea.
It reflects how the CISO role itself is changing, too. It's becoming way more strategic. About 24% of CISOs now report directly to the CEO. That means that they need to be able to translate technical, risk, complex stuff into business impact. What does this mean for financial loss, reputation, regulatory fines? That's the language the board understands.
Okay, so wrapping this all up then, the big picture seems to be cyberspace is getting incredibly complex. The complexity is fueling inequality, making it harder for everyone, especially smaller players, to stay resilient. And driving all this are sophisticated criminals, often boosted by AI, plus these ongoing geopolitical tensions. It sounds intense.
It is intense. But, the report isn't entirely doom and gloom. There's a sense of cautious optimism, too. It strongly suggests that being proactive about risk, collaborating across different sectors and organizations, and making smart, equitable investments can make a real difference. But we absolutely have to tackle those systemic issues. The supply chain weaknesses, the skills gap, those are critical.
So it really comes down to collective responsibility and leadership that sees cybersecurity not just as a tech issue, but central to economic health.
I think that's a fair summary, yes. It requires a coordinated effort.
All right, well, that gives us a lot to think about. So maybe the final thought for you listening is this. As you reflect on everything we've discussed, what part of your own digital life or the organizations you deal with feels most exposed to these tangled complexities?
And maybe what small part can you play in building a stronger, more collective cyber resilience?